I've always had a fascination with Stanley Kubrick, trying to research and overanalyze all of his work since he's easily my favorite director, even though that's not an original opinion or anything. From Lolita in 2001 to Full Metal Jacket and A Clockwork Orange, each piece of his filmography has added to a layer of obsession with his thematic patterns, techniques of cinematography, and really has just influenced how I look at all other movies.
This must just be a complimentary tea break. If you broke for tea at 4, you don't have to break for tea at 6, at quarter to 7, then break for a meal at 7:30. So figure it out.
A cinematic god firmly labeled a genius by some.
Stanley, I think what stops him from being a genius, for me, is this lack of humanity.
But not Malcolm McDowell, apparently. Kubrick has had a heavy focus on human behavior, interests, perversions, the ways of people and their fears since far before he ever stepped onto the movie scene. Between the years of 1945 and 1950, Stanley Kubrick began his journey into the world and the study of human lives with a job as a New York-based photographer for Look magazine, a post-war pictorial that showcased scenes of everyday life. In 1972, Kubrick told an interviewer, "By the time I was 21, I had 4 years of seeing how things worked in the world. I think if I had gone to college, I would never have been a director." The themes in his photos with Look have been described as dark and voyeuristic, and in a weird, I don't know if I should say yes kind of way, I think I would agree. We see themes of simple love, like here, in Life and Love on the New York City subway, or in Park Benches, Love is Everywhere. And a more common theme for Kubrick, the common interactions between others and their influences on each other, some of my favorites including Shoeshine Boy, the debutante who went to work, and this other photo from the Life and Love on the New York City subway. Though Kubrick left the magazine in 1950, he carried these values and interests into the unforgettable films we love so much today. Out of all of them, there were 3 of my favorites that happened to showcase this the most: A Clockwork Orange, The Shining, and Full Metal Jacket.
Good morning, little schoolgirl. I'm a little schoolboy, too.
For the sake of time, I will not be completely analyzing or explaining the contents of these movies fully, but I highly recommend them as not only study pieces, but as overall pieces of art.
It's no good sitting there in hope, my little brothers. I won't say a single solitary slogan unless I have my lawyer here. I know the law, you bastards.
A Clockwork Orange, in its simplest form, is a movie about good and evil, the contrast of it, the right of human beings to choose, what happens when we lose that ability, the toxic masculinity and violence, Alex's obsession with the overpowering of those below him, women, and how that obsession of power causes him to lose control, and the ability to act on his temptations of rape, murder, and destruction.
As I am your Drugan leader, I'm entitled to know what goes on, eh?
Stanley is a master of human behavior, and though he doesn't make violence seem like a morally sound decision,
violence is a very horrible thing.
He recognizes it as a human action, and that violence in itself is the act of a human who is not controlled by anyone but themselves, even if that makes them crazy, which fits in with The Shining and Full Metal Jacket too, but we'll get into that. It helps a lot that Alex DeLarge is such a strangely likable character, even if we don't want to admit that. He has an appreciation for the spoken word, a love of beauty and art, Beethoven of all things, and these mixed with his self-victimization make us focus on the fact that he is affected by the quote-unquote evil world around him, rather than the fact that he is committing disgusting and awful acts. He has a sense of mental superiority that elevates to the point that he lives in a world with no humanity. And even though he is evil, his ability to act in a human way is refreshing. In reality, there isn't one character in this movie that isn't evil, but because Alex admits he is, we are brought to believe he is a better representation of a human than everybody else.
When a man cannot choose, he ceases to be a man.
At the end of the movie, we ultimately see that no reformation by any doctor, parole officer, or prison chaplain can take away the impulses he has, and the need for violence he desires, and that Alex is the only human among a sea of imposters.
I love you, Danny. I love you more than anything else in the whole world. I would never do anything hurt you. Never.
How does someone become mad? How does isolation and vulnerability lead us to question ourselves? The Shining is the story of a man at the lowest point of his life, in an attempt to create a fresh start, seeing a caretaker position as an opportunity to give his writing career a boost, but feels that his family is holding him back. We are immediately informed at the beginning that Jack is an alcoholic that has injured his son before.
My husband had been drinking, and he came home about 3 hours late, so he wasn't exactly in the greatest mood that night. But on this particular occasion, my husband just used too much strength and he injured Danny's arm.
Providing us with a motivation for the character to ultimately attempt to murder his family in an axe-swinging rage. Though we see aspects of supernatural and paranormal elements with the shining power of Halloran and Danny, Stanley chooses to include this in Jack through his slow descent into madness through isolation and a belief that he is becoming inferior to the rest of his family. His writing career is failing, leaving the duties of a caretaker to his wife that he can't even fulfill. He becomes a man who has nothing to show for his life of work, which he seems to blame his family for in his constant degradation of Wendy.
Why don't you start right now and get the fuck out of here?
And the past we've already learned he has with Danny. Kubrick makes us question the effects of isolation, and chose to pull apart the human elements of Stephen King's novel to emphasize the vulnerability of being alone. We feel uncomfortable with Jack Torrance. We see the family as an unhinged one.
They got snowbound one winter in the mountains. They had to resort to cannibalism in order to stay alive.
I mentioned previously the idea of control in violently human characters. But unlike Alex, Jack is trying to escape the control he feels is over him, the top-tier brick wall, his wife and child. Kubrick leads us to ask ourselves what leads someone to a violent insanity, to go to extreme lengths for the things they want, to break down that wall.
I wanted to meet interesting and stimulating people of an ancient culture and kill them. I wanted to be the first kid on my block to get a confirmed kill.
While researching all three of these movies, The Shining always seemed to be the odd one out to me. Of course, it's a wonderful example of the use of human behavior, but compared to A Clockwork Orange, it really doesn't feel like there are a lot of similarities and themes. But finding similarities between A Clockwork Orange and Full Metal Jacket was a different story, considering I believe that Stanley had similar themes and motivations for both movies. One of the multiple war movies made by Kubrick, we see a clear theme of the loss of individuality, a power imbalance that aims to mold men into the perfect killing machines.
Sir, yes, sir! Private Joker, why did you join my beloved corps? Sir, to kill, sir! So you're a killer? Sir, yes, sir! Let me see your war face!
This is clear right at the beginning of the movie, where we are introduced to the idea of the loss of individuality for the first time, the iconic head shaving scene. This was never a war movie. I mean, it was. This is a Vietnam War movie, obviously, but Kubrick never made a war movie without the human behavior aspect, and this movie was no different. This was a movie about becoming the ultimate killing machine, losing all connection to the values you thought you held.
You write "Born to Kill" on your helmet, and you wear a peace button. What is it supposed to mean?
I think I was trying to suggest something about the duality of man, sir.
We have Sergeant Hartman, the intimidating drill sergeant who aims to embarrass and demean them, dehumanizing them and toughening them up, teaching them to not hesitate, foreshadowing the rest of the movie and acting as a reflection of the real world and the harsh atmosphere of Vietnam.
If your killer instincts are not clean and strong, you will hesitate at the moment of truth. You will not kill.
And you have Private Pyle, whose repeated abuse and degradation turns him into the ultimate Marine, a cog in the machine, a broken and reformed personality. Shaped by Joker, who fought back at Hartman's ability to break him, Pyle created a mentality that combined the personality of Joker and the ideals of Sergeant Hartman. This duality of Private Pyle is explained through the second half of the movie, after he has already taken his life due to the forced changes made to someone who was not cut out for the life of war. Joker is what's left of Pyle, the last unbroken piece of the puzzle, someone who has not gone against his ideals and values until he is forced to kill the sniper. He is faced with shooting not only a woman, but a child as well, something he previously opposed.
How can you shoot women and children?
And still did as he looked her in the eye as she begged him to kill her. Killing the sniper destroys a piece of his humanity that he will never get back, the horrors of war that will live in his memory, the breaking down of his psyche, his person, himself. And how do you live with yourself after all you have left of yourself is lost? Stanley Kubrick's extensive filmography shaped the world, and at times I believe it scared people who weren't ready to see murder, rape, psychological torture, and trauma through the 60s and the 80s, a time of shock factor horror and people who didn't want to face the actions and needs of themselves, at least not in public or in film, where it was such a taboo subject. Honored by the actors he worked with for his hospitality and fluidity in his work that subtly allowed the flow of spontaneity, he was a director that portrayed his vision through others and molded the film industry into something truly amazing. He brought to light the influences we have on each other, whether we are malevolent or kind people, and will forever be a legend in the field.